Yeah, films. We watched some films. So let's talk about
Awesome.
those.
Let's talk about NK's work.
Do
Um,
it.
so one of the first things is I found this quote from her that just said, "I write what feels good," and I found that really inspirational, and just like motivating. And in that same vein of what you're saying, right, is like uh, just writing it. Right, it doesn't
Mhm.
have to have this ulterior motive or this purpose. It's just because um, it's feels good. Feels good to write
Yep,
it, and other people are gonna enjoy it, and that's cool.
yep.
So I think one of the biggest things that I found the most interesting about her work is like this inspiration of hers is really founded in these two like you're saying about her parents, these two like dichotomous like worlds of like
Mhm.
dreams, which are like unreal. They're just made up, fantastical, and then science, right? Like grounded in science, like geology,
Yeah,
astrophysics, like all those things that
climate
are
change, yeah.
applicable like to creating a world,
Mhm.
but also like being able to have enough imagination to envision what that world looks like, what the people look like in that place,
Yeah,
because it's more than just the science of
yeah.
people. Um, which is kinda like what I growing up, I wanted to be an architect because I always felt like that was a really good blend between being artistic and then also, like, both sides of your brain because there's, like, math
Mhm.
involved, which is why I'm not an architect. Like, math, because you have to be like, "This has to stand, this has to be able to
Yeah,
exist."
we gotta
Um,
physics it.
yeah, like, is it gonna but then also, like, being able to design this thing that doesn't exist elsewhere. I was like, "This is"
Mhm.
again,
You can
math,
do that
but
with writing, you got it.
yeah, exactly. So with Jemisin, her work begins with a dream. So her writing process starts with a rough remembrance of a dream that she had. It's this concept that lingers in her mind. It's fuzzy at the edges when she wakes up, and then she focuses in on the elements that she remembers, asking herself questions like why did this happen or how did this happen to unpack the
Mm.
larger picture. And then she also brings with that exploration the emotions that linger after the dream has dissipated, which help to answer those questions because it's not just like how do we get to this area of my weird
So
dream. It's like
cool.
what do I feel in this dream and why did I feel that?
Yeah.
And for the Broken Earth trilogy, she found herself standing in a surreal tableau with a massive floating in the distance. It was a chunk of rock shaped like a volcanic cone, a cone shaped smoking mountain, she recalled. Standing before the formation was a black woman in her mid 40s with dreadlocks who appeared to be holding the volcano aloft with her mind. She was glaring down at Jemison in radiating anger. Jameson did not know how she had triggered the woman's fury, but she believed that if she did not ameliorate it quickly, the woman would hurl the smoldering massive at her. And writer Rafi Kachadorian, that Kat mentioned, super helpful. Thank you for your article in the New Yorker, titled "N.K. Jemison's Dream Worlds." Um, for these details. So, for her next trilogy, the Inheritance trilogy, the dream that kicked off this exploration of enslaved deities featured two gods. One had dark as night hair that contained a starry cosmos of infinite depth. The other, in a child's body, manipulated planets like toys. And seeing these two gods, she thought, of a whole world that would then subjugate those gods. What does that
Mhm.
look like? But further than dreams, Jemison also immerses herself into the world that she creates. And though it is science fiction, speculative fiction, or fantasy, they are world building and magical genres that are grounded in real world influences and science.
Mhm.
Real speculation of like what could happen, kind of similar to what we were seeing with like Margaret Atwood in Oryx and Crake. Like
Mhm.
these are real things that have happened. It's grounded in facts and science. It's totally possible if this world existed that these things would happen, right?
Yeah.
On her desktop in this article, they mentioned that she has a folder with information gathered from a NASA funded workshop called Launchpad, which discuss what could happen to the Earth if we lost our moon. And the article explains some speculated that our planet's axis would tilt wildly, triggering haphazard ice ages, and that its core might lose its stability, causing earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. The fragments in Jemisin's folder began to pair up. She imagined a planet that had lost its moon and became seismically hyperactive. Such a place, she reasoned, could sustain life, but just barely. Mass extinctions would be common. If the woman in her dream inhabited that planet, she wondered, then what would her civilization look like? Um, and
Wow.
again, that
And that's what the
that's
wow.
what it is, right? Which we're gonna talk about next week. Like I'm like so excited. Um, but that reminds me of like how Butler wrote the pattern series backwards, the patternist,
Mhm.
where it was like she started at the end and was like, "How did I get here?" It's kind of like that. Like you get to this, you start with the end. She says. So to fully understand the circumstances, environments of her worlds, Jemison inhabits those spaces. So she spends time in boring courtrooms for notes on how to write courtroom scenes for her upcoming book trilogy about New York because it's going to
Mhm.
feature a courtroom. She explores New York to learn more about its history, to apply that to that trilogy, feeling like she needs to learn more about that before she can fully flesh it out because it's so much about the city. Like the city
Mhm.
itself is almost a character, or
Yeah.
is a character, honestly. To get a firsthand feel for volcanoes, she flew to Hawaii to smell sulfur and ash. To learn how people prepared for environmental stress, she researched end of days survivalists, though she stopped short of going into the wilderness to meet them.
Mhm.
She was, in the article, she's quoted like, I'm not that stupid. um, but it's a matter of like, you think about, you have go bags, right? You think about what it
Mhm.
is that people would do. What are we already doing? What is the reasonable next step that, although it is a fantastical world where you are, and next week we'll talk about it, kind of scrambling to figure out what's going on, there's still
Mhm.
enough of like the regular science and like facts that you don't have to fill in a lot of the blanks. It's easy to understand a world that exists like that.
Mhm.
So it helps you. So with the fifth season, I'm going to do brief some pieces about some of her work. Again, we're going to be talking about fifth season specifically next week, not the whole Broken Earth trilogy because I haven't gotten through all of it.
Mhm.
Um, but I'll probably talk some bits about it because I even spoiled a bit of it for myself. But it wasn't like I wasn't let down. I was like I was kind of already thinking that's where it was going, and it kind of helped me see
Mhm.
the book from a different lens. So I might just spoil it for myself, and I think I'll still really enjoy it. So,
Mhm.
so fantasy writer J.R.R. Tolkien started his world that we all know, Lord of the Rings, with a map. And drawing this environment, he developed the language, the systems, the caste systems, the cultures of this fantastical realm. Like, who lives here? What do they look like? Why do they look like that? How do they interact with each other? Which is why I could not finish that book.
Mhm.
Got mostly through the Hobbit politics of like this Hobbit people don't like those Hobbit people, and I was like, but why? I was like, that's how like aliens would feel about reading about us.
Yeah.
Like, why don't they like each other? Because they're a little darker than the. What is that?
Yeah.
For what reason? Anyway, that's me with Lord of the Rings. Again, I can't do fantasy really, but Jemison also begins her journey of Broken Earth with a map of the stillness, is which is what the place is called.
Mm.
She places her wealthy populace, those in power and therefore corrupt. Absolute power in the center near the equator. And she deems that this is a geologically stable spot on fault lines that she designed. So it makes sense that they would be there and they would be stable enough to subsist over some of the other geological disasters and therefore be able to have some type of power over the rest of the people.
Mhm.
You minis. So the next element in the stew that is Jemison's imagination, the brew of storytelling, and a concoction of new worlds is psychology and history. So Jemison aspires to explore systems of subjugation. There is a critical and keen eye that focuses on the oppression of certain peoples, of acts of rebellions, and of the New World Order and what it will take to get there, which is usually something catastrophic. Like, we got to break it to remake it.
Yeah.
Made that as a slogan.
Yeah,
Um,
that's a beautiful sentence structure that you just had. I was just like in awe. I was like, the brew of store. Wow. You just say words so good. All right.
Maybe I
Continue.
should be a writer.
Yeah, you are. You already are a
I
writer.
am
You
a
just need
writer.
to
You're right.
write
You're right. You're
more.
right. I
Yeah.
need to finish.
Claim it.
There's no. Yeah, you're right. I am a writer.
You just wrote that
So
beautiful sentence.
I did, and I can read so many sentences.
Yeah.
I was so inspired when I was writing this, just for people who are listening. Like, Jemisin is so inspiring. Like, it was
Yeah.
writing itself. Like, I was like, "Woo!" I just want to tell everyone about how amazing she is. So,
Yeah.
if you like that, you should just read her stuff.
Yeah.
For Broken Earth, she decided arbitrarily that the woman in her dream lived in the volatile hinterlands, and then began to treat that decision like a discovered fact. I'm like, okay, why isn't she working to stabilize this powerful, wealthy part of society? Well, she must have had at one point of well, she must have at one point been part of that life, but somehow got away. Gradually, the contours of a story emerged. You let intuition do whatever it is going to do. I had a sentence in mind. Let's start with the end of the world. That can mean the literal end of the world, it can mean the end of civilization, or it can mean grief.
Yeah.
And that's when she decided to um, pretty much start with the death of a child.
Hmm.
And it was a familiar fact for her because at the time of writing, her own mother was ill. So
Hmm.
um, she was very familiar with grief, and that is pretty earth shattering.
Yeah.
Um, for each of Jemisin's stories, there is intention and education. As fantastical or imagined her worlds are, there's always some semblance of familiarity and possibility, which again makes it really easy to understand. It's like, oh, of course, yeah, that's how that works. Again, we'll talk about it next week, but there's sometimes where I just say stuff and I'm like, I don't know what that means, but of course that's what it is.
Yeah.
Um, the other interesting thing and important thing, which touched upon in their section, was that Jemison is bringing some color to the future, into the fantastical. And
Mhm.
as Octavia Butler had said about the lack of diversity in genre work, she said, I wrote myself in. And so too does N.K. Jemisin. Butler fought against critics in a world that limited her worlds. She, N.K. Jemisin, and the other writers of color were asked to remove any POC or racial issues from their narratives, afraid that readers wouldn't be able to relate. As if BIPOC people BIPOC don't find connections in the
Yeah.
world and in fiction, despite the incredible lack of melanin on screen all the time.
Yeah.
We do that all,
That's
like, we already covered this. Like, we did this. Watch our Turning Red episode.
yeah.
You can do that. Like, you can relate to a different thing. Anyway,
Yeah.
further, they're asking them to remove the people of color because they won't be relatable. But then on top of that, these publishers or others in power, despite demanding that, still label the work as African American science fiction.
Mm.
But you just told me it's not. So what is it? What are we doing?
Yeah.
Just because you're just anyway thinking even now of Octavia Butler being the mother of Afrofuturism, but she's just as much a writer of speculative fiction as Atwood.
Mhm.
She's also a speculative fiction writer. She's a science fiction writer, period. That's it. Butler has said on the matter, science fiction reaches into the future, the past, the human mind. It reaches out to other worlds and into other dimensions. Is it really so limited then that it cannot reach into the lives of ordinary, everyday humans who happen not to be white? Again, this whole episode has been making me really think of Limocha. I've had these conversations with her many times.
Yeah.
She's just like, it's so
We should
important.
cover Black Women Are Scary. Like we should
Yes.
bring that
Yes. And
on
we
our
will. We're
yeah.
going to be doing some local or like smaller writers in the fall. So stay tuned, everyone.
Yeah.
But Butler felt the strongest thing to do to fight this was to simply be here. And Jemison is out here. So one of her more recent works, How Long Till Black Future Month, which is a collection of short stories, was inspired by two memories of watching the Jetsons growing up. And she said, I noticed something. There's nobody even slightly brown in the Jetsons world. This is supposed to be the real world's future, right? Albeit in silly, humorous form. Thing is, not white people make up most of the world's population. Now, as well as back in the 60s when the show was created, so what happened to all those people in the minds of this show's creator? Are they down beneath the clouds where the Jetsons never go? Was there an apocalypse? Or maybe a pogrom? Was there a memo? And
Yeah.
one of the short stories in this collection, which is kind of made me think of like her, similar to her idea of like, sure, I'll put white people in it, but you ain't gonna like them. is
Yeah.
one of her short stories is titled Cloud Dragon Skies, and in it humanity has taken to the skies, um, Jetson fashion, and they live in a ring-shaped colony in space built from crushed asteroids. Again, totally doable. And
Yeah.
due to ecological disaster, the Earth is near uninhabitable. The atmosphere is tainted, and there's toxic chemicals influencing new forms of life, which, like, I'm not going to say a spoiler, but it made me think of a recent thing I watched. There are a few humans who have stayed behind, one of which is our narrator, and who is telling the story. And she explains, one morning we awoke and the sky was a pale, blushing rose. We began to see intentions in the slow, ceaseless movements of the clouds. Instead of floating, they swam spirals in the sky. They gathered in knots, trailing wisps like feet and tails. We felt them watching us. Um, like it was alive. Again, not gonna say what it reminds me of, but something like that is
Mm.
alive. You know what I'm saying? Somebody out there is getting
Yes.
it. And I bet you he read that. So anyway, like Butler, she imagined a future in which we don't abandon Earth to continue our malicious and disastrous human ways, but instead inspires a future of progress, evolution, and adaptation. Specifically, I'm thinking of Lilith's brood and the fact that, like, we can fix this. Like
Mhm.
there's an opportunity, and there are certain people who would be more inclined to fixing it, right? In it, the people on Earth who are still here accept the new cloud forms as natural, as a piece of their environment, just as at home as they are. Believing that in a redemptive future, humanity must adapt to its ecosystem, not shape it. There's a respect there,
Yeah.
that there's a natural evolution. Yeah, we are going to mess up the
That's
world. We are doing that, but
uh,
it's gonna change and we gotta still respect it.
yeah.
Like, yeah, we did that, but
That's
now
like the
that's what it
whole
is.
thing. Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
okay, that's just how it is now. And deal. In keeping with her psychological explorations, the humans in power are still faulty and harmful. And not understanding the new creatures, they react violently and try to eliminate the Earth's new shapes,
Mm.
leaving the How to flee Earth and live amongst the other humans, acting as orator, keeping the truth alive through story, which
Mm.
sometimes is all you can do. Right, Butler? You just keep telling the stories.
Mhm.
And for too long, the genre world elevated the voices of problematic and frankly uninteresting writers. Um,
Mhm.
frankly uninteresting is, it's me putting my little flavor in there, but shadowing the work of others, honestly, and as if to say there was no room for diversity in the future or in the fantastical. What does it say that entire groups of people, cultures, and lifestyles are erased from our predictive and speculative texts? Are we not going to be here in the future? Do we no longer matter? Are we to be erased in the future as experiences of our ancestors have been in the past and present? Talking about,
Yeah.
like, how
That's
we
what they
need
want.
to,
That's
we
what
need to have.
they're on the nose about it.
They're working on it. They're trying really hard.
Yeah.
You can't talk about past. This doesn't exist. We got to rewrite it. And it's like, no.
Mhm.
And so, like, at least let us write the future and let us also be in the future. You're gonna tell me that, like, the Jetsons, they in this? Come on. All right. But even Tolkien was affected by the racist rhetoric of his time. And again, The Lord of the Rings is a really amazing work of literature. It's very impactful. It is beautifully written. There's a lot in there. Again, he built an entire world. It's an epic, right? It's foundational in the world. So not discrediting that, but everyone knows you just gotta. He's even said it. So his orcs, the monstrous and disgusting agents of evil, are questionably designed. Okay, again, product of his time. In a letter explaining his idea, he said they are or were squat, broad, flat nosed, sallow skinned, with wide mouths and slant eyes. In fact, degraded and repulsive versions of the, to Europeans at least, lovely Mongol types.
Mm.
Hmm. It sounds like it's like
Racism, maybe.
and again, like he's very foundational to the fantastic world. You can't erase that, right? I I refuse to read anything horror about Ray Bradbury, but I know probably a problem, right? And the same thing with horror, which we have talked about many times.
Mhm.
H.P. Lovecraft. Fuck him. And we've mentioned this so many times. Still foundational. We get it. Fuck him anyway. Up until recently, the World Fantasy Award was a bust of H.P. Lovecraft. So imagine winning that as a person of color, a person that he thought was less than a human.
Yeah.
Having a statue of a man, just look up the name of his cat. Or being Jewish and having the statue of this man in your house.
Yeah.
An
entire problem.
Yeah, so we have discussed the problems of Lovecraft a few times on the show, in Lovecraft Country again, in our H.P. Lovecraft episode, and other episodes that just have Lovecraftian themes. We just got to put it out there every time, just so you know.
Yeah,
you have an impact, but you also. So for those missing out, he was a racist, anti-Semite, loved Hitler, wanted to be European so bad.
Yeah.
Didn't eat any vegetables. Named his cat terrible names, was awful to his wife, just an all-around shit person. Loser, complete loser, who has greatly impacted the world of horror. Can't deny it. So subverting this harmful rhetoric by featuring powerful and heroic POC characters against his monstrosity is always a win. And in her upcoming trilogy, she's expanding upon her short story, The City Born Great, and going to build that into this trilogy. And this is the one that's like in New York. So Jemisin has explained that the story is part Ghostbusters and part Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai Across the Eighth Dimension. She's such a nerd. I get so excited. It takes place in New York as it is invaded by interdimensional aliens. And those aliens are Lovecraftian in nature with long tendrils, otherworldly, sinister. She describes them as like the tendril mass looms, ethereal and pale. These monsters are confronted and fought off by heroes that have Lovecraft turning in his grave because they're BIPOC and varying in gender. And they're still as important.
Wow.
In an article on Tor.com. Yeah, who knew, right? In an article on Tor.com titled N.K. Jemisin's new contemporary fantasy trilogy will mess with the Lovecraft legacy, Jemisin explains, to boil it down, it's about a group of people who embody the spirit of the city of New York. They raise the city up into a kind of metaphysical entity that will help to fight against basically Cthulhu. This is deliberately a chance for me to kind of mess with the Lovecraft legacy. He was a notorious racist and horrible human being. So this is a chance for me to have the chattering hordes. That's what he called the horrifying brown people of New York that terrified him. Chattering hordes. This is a chance for me to basically have them kick the ass of his creation. So I'm looking forward to having some fun with that. And we love to see it. Yeah. Yeah, like anytime you can be like, oh, is that scary? I do also love this like answer of like kind of like Godzilla, where like let them fight, you know?
Yeah.
Oh, you brought Cthulhu, we have a whole city now, it's gonna fight you. Like, what is that? Love it. So definitely check out our episode about the book Lovecraft Country for more on things that would make Lovecraft vomit his racist little heart out. So yeah. He would be like so upset. And then completing this, I want to highlight in Brightest Day and Darkest Night, when she is not writing fantastical futures in other worlds, she is piloting narratives of some of our favorite superheroes. N.K. Jemisin has written one of the recent runs of the Green Lantern Corps, featuring the amazing Sojourner Joe Mullen. I love the Green Lantern series. If we're going to talk about nerds, it's one of the only comic book series that I was keeping up with for a long time. I have not read Far Sector, but I have it here. My partner has read it, says it's amazing, and showed me some cool things in here. Art is amazing by Jamal Campbell, so check it out if you haven't. And it's an incredible story, and I remember hearing about it even before I read this season, knowing that it was behind it, and then seeing Joe, I was like, yes, finally. When like, first of all, Green Lantern being the first like comic book series to have the fridge your girlfriend trope, where like one of the Green Lanterns, literally Kyle Rayner finds his girlfriend in the fridge. Like when you fridge the girlfriend, it tells you to do something. Like that's the trope started with Green Lantern, and the fact that most of the women up until recent times were like the Star Sapphires, they are just like in like it's just like one piece thing. It's like no clothes, and their power is love. Like they're driven by love. Like we can't also be driven by hope or driven by willpower or like rage. Like, are you kidding me? Anyway,
Yeah.
it's gotten better. There are a lot more, and like the outfits for the Sapphires have gotten better, but still,
Hmm.
for a series like that is also in space, and she's a space nerd. She loves comics, so I got very excited
Hmm.
because Jemisin is a lovable blurred who appreciates and thrives in this medium. So of course this is going to be a great series. I'm very excited to read. And in her version, or in her in Joe, the
Hmm.
Green Lantern, it takes place in a city state on a megastructure at the edge of the known universe, and it is a civilization of multi-species.
Mm.
And Green Lantern Joe Mullen, who looks incredibly like my love, Janelle Monáe,
Hmm.
incredibly so. I don't mean. They're a detective. And in that same New Yorker article, bless them, they explain although it is a comic book, the writing carries Jemisin's wry tone, interest in power, and unapologetic use of allegory. The series opens with Mullen surveying a murder scene while considering an aphorism from Things Fall Apart, Chinua Achebe's novel of colonialism. A man who makes trouble for others is also making it for himself. It lingers in her mind, but Mullen dismisses it, noting, I'm the one causing the trouble just by existing. Um, and in the end, N.K. Jemisin is a foundational part of the fantasy genre, a necessary voice to keep us in the future and in the fantastical. And I hope she continues to share her dreams with us.
Yeah, no, 100%. We're gonna read all of their stuff. So
Yeah, I'm like, oh my god, I can't read everything all the time. I will say,
you
like, it's
can though. We can just make all of our episodes about books now.
that's it. We're just book people now. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, I've been reading so much, and I've been reading so many like dark, sad things
Hmm.
that I like had to pivot. I was like, "Help me out, my friend who needs a book talk because all she does is read." I was like, "Help me! What is something that's just sweet and nice?" Like we were watching Heartstoppers or like
Hmm.
reading Heartstoppers. Like I just need something where it all
That's
works
cute.
out.
Yeah.
People are in love or just happy,
Wholesome.
like best friends hanging out. That's what I
Yeah.
need. Even in like with fifth season, because like some of these things get heavy, and I'm just like, I'm too sad. I can't go to sleep now. I'm finding a
Hmm.
lot of books are not bedtime reading. So
Yeah.
if you're following my Twitter, it's like 70% of it right now is me being like, don't read this at night.
Yeah. Sometimes you need just like fun stuff. That's why I want to make a fun one too. Because like my webtoon's like really serious and sad. I
Yeah.
want to make a fun one too that's just like, haha, good times.
Yeah.
So you
Yeah.
need a little both. You need a little both.
That's like, well, yeah, one of my stories is just like, what if we could just put these fun characters in a place? And it's
Yeah.
crazy.
Well,
And
they
I'm
just
like,
exist now. Look at them do.
yeah, I just want them to be crazy. Yes. So please, please, please read Ed.K. Jemisin. And next week we're going to be talking about the fifth season. You could try to read it before if you haven't
That's a
before our
long book,
episode, but that's
though.
a long time. So
Yeah.
um,
Well, like, listen to this and then, like, pause for a little bit and you could skip ahead or you could just wait.
yeah,
Books
yeah.
forever, Gabe. Nothing but books.
Forever.
Books on books.
Yeah, our next series in October will be there's books and then there's like shows. So it'll be fun in that way.
Totally
But yeah. I'll say is like I want to be friends with the writers that wrote the books. Rest in peace, Butler. I think we would be friends. And Atwood, like again, we don't hate you.
Yeah.
We could be your friend. We could be an acquaintance.
Yeah.
But we want to be your friend,
I enjoyed the
okay? And
evil
we want
laugh.
to be your friend, Sylvia, as
Yeah.
well. So, yeah. So tune in next week for that. Let us know if you have read some of her books. Again, it's queued up. We're ready to go. We're not done reading. We're gonna be reading forever because she has 2 trilogies, and then a duology, and then she's working on another trilogy. Like NK, could you like slow down?
No.
Just work on some fan fiction for a minute.
No.
Like play some like Horizon Zero Dawn.
Yeah,
Like
it's
just
good.
chill out
Play
and then
Stray. Stray's really good.
play some Stray. You love cats. That's my dice will love it. You make the little meow button.
Yeah.
And your cats are like, what are you saying?
Yeah.
It's great. Do that. Just do that for a minute. Let me catch up. There's only so many hours in a day.
Yeah.
And then you'll be ready, and I'll be ready, and it'll be great. Or maybe just write them so that they're out there. They're always going to be there. So
I really like the book. I'm excited to finish it. I will not finish it in time for next week, I think, but it's okay. It's part of the. It's part.
I'm gonna spoil it, but you're gonna have to deal.
Yeah, I actually like spoilers sometimes because I'll still read it because it's like I find the unknown very stressful. I like.
It also helps you really get it.
I like to know what's important for me to be paying attention to. So if I know what the end is, I'll know like what parts I should be like extra looking at. You know?
Yeah, exactly. And that's how I feel now. I'm like, hey, I kind of know this thing is gonna happen. So
yeah, it's like that TikToker I saw who like cut the binding off of all of his books in school and scanned them so that he could Control F his textbooks before those things existed. You know, it's just good to know the full picture of what's actually important before you have to look at a giant piece of thing, you know?
I'll tell you what, I have that thought all the time.
You should do it.
I would love to Control F things in my life.
Yeah.
Like Control F my keys.
Okay. Yeah.
Where
I
are
don't
they?
think it'll do that with like books though. They aren't already digital. That's more.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah. But
it's a good joke.
You know,
it's a good joke. I get it. But I
Control
like,
F serotonin.
Yeah. Well, that's
where would
just
that be?
At the cats. Where's Charlie?
Yeah, it would highlight. It would be like, here it is, and then Control F money.
I
and
it's like Control F money.
Highlight fans.
I would like some Control F money.
That's an idea I had for a short film. So maybe one day I'll do it.
Money or OnlyFans?
Just Control F. It was kind of like a monkey's paw.
Oh, and then you find
like be careful what you wish for.
Yeah.
Because there's always a pit. You always have to pay.
Yeah. Now
it always comes at a cost.
You've seen something you can't unsee.
You remember we did gifts?
Mm-hmm.
Careful, and we did wishes.
And you're like, dang, I really didn't want to know that about that person, but now I do.
Yeah.
You Control F to find out if your crush likes you, but then you find out they've had like really disturbing sexual fantasies about you, and now you don't like them anymore. That's an option for the story. Yeah.
That's real funny.
You're like, oh, ew, no. You don't seem to view women as people. I don't think I like you anymore. Yeah.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah.
Cool.
Use it for story.
Thank you. Free. That's what writing groups are for.
I want to do it. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Okay,
we're gonna start one.
Extend longer than with random facts about us now.
Don't get married.
They'll eat your kids.
Or your kid gets murdered and you get very angry. You're magical.
Yeah.
Wait till next week. It's gonna be it's sad.
So emotional.
It's so sad.
Yeah.
Why'd you do this to us, Jemisin?
Yeah, the part of it
Thank
right now
you.
is like
also,
very sad.
yeah. Well, we'll see. All right. Well, bye.